Anin Zimagnish Indigenous Cause, and welcome back to Niiji Sobriety Chat. I'm glad that we're getting more and better daylight as spring approaches us here. Today I want to talk about. We'll start off this way. I just celebrated a milestone on Saturday. It was 18 years ago that I came to Duluth as a homeless person, unemployed. I had the clothes on my back. That's still, that was a rock bottom, but that wasn't the rock bottom that led to my sobriety. But I'm still proud that I was able to achieve what I have, because some people hit that low point of homelessness and they just don't make it out. So my hat's off to all of you that have. My prayers are with you for all of those who are still struggling with homelessness. And it has been quite a journey. When I first came here, I did know that I was Native. I did not even know the name of my tribe. My cousin Scott started to do the homework to, where we belonged and who we belonged to, and that was the Mendota Metawakan. And through his inspiration, I got enrolled. In the beginning, where I had, I didn't know anything about being Native when I first got here. Everything I learned came from Gunsmoke and Clint Eastwood movies. And how I learned about the Native culture and spirituality were from some of the most humblest people. They were my Native American relatives who were in the shelter. Some were addicts, some down on their luck, some had other issues, but that's where I started to learn from. And as my appreciation for the culture and the spirituality grew, it started leading me into sobriety. I would have enough respect for, if I went to a powwow, I would abstain from using any chemicals 4 days before. And same thing if I knew I was going to be at some kind of a ceremony. And from there it grew. I did, at one point, at the beginning of that part of the journey, have a dream that I was laying on the ground in the fetal position. And there were 4 jingle dress dancers dancing around me. They're wearing green and blue. And at one point they stopped and they all came together to form a wigwam over me. And I asked Skip one time what that meant, and he said, "Man, you were fucked up." And that was the beginning of your healing journey. And through time, I was lucky enough to have healers like Skip to just be around. That's how I learned from him, just being around him. I didn't ask a lot of questions. I just learned from watching. And, Skip has left us, but he's still with us. The ancestors always watch over us. And it was even at the beginning of my sobriety that Babette asked me to take care of the Duluth Civic Center staff. And that was a big part of my sobriety, was out of respect for that position. I'd never been exposed to anything like that. It did lead to, a lot of recognition in the area. I worked at the homeless shelter for 12 years, and when it was time to move on from there, I started to work for Fond du Lac. And from there, I had the wonderful opportunity to start making videos for them. And that was great. That, was also a greater part of my recognition. I also, stayed really involved with my community. And that was a very important part of my sobriety, was that connection to community. And, things are good. Sometimes they're not the greatest. And, life isn't perfect 100% of the time. And, how you choose to deal with your ups and downs is, the quality of the journey you're taking on that path. Things still happen that, make me think about it for a day or two about, what's going on or why that happened, or, what can I do to avoid having that happen again. And I think, a big part in my sobriety is knowing my own responsibility in my own life. People don't owe me anything. And, when things go wrong, especially like when I first came here, that was like, probably the biggest step I took when I got to the shelter was reevaluating my life. If you ever end up homeless, reevaluating your life is a good thing to do. And, I could have blamed a lot of people for, how I had ended up there. But, the more I thought about it, the only person I really had to blame was myself, because I allowed these things to happen to me. I didn't care enough about myself to allow them to happen to me. I didn't care enough about myself to allow myself to become involved with the wrong people. And funny thing is, in that world of addiction, what you think is love might not be love. Love with a lifestyle, maybe, because that's all you're really living for. But I had thought about that, and whose fault was it, where I was at in my life. It was totally my fault. And I didn't, and that wasn't looking down on myself. That was realizing that this is a point at which I need to change. And this is before sobriety even. As I entered back into, I guess getting on my feet, a job, a place to stay, there were things that I said to myself, I didn't have the cash in my pocket, I didn't need it. So I just, credit was something I was no longer dealing with. I was still smoking back then. The first thing I would do on payday is pay my rent and make sure that I had enough cigarettes to last me for 2 weeks. Because at the time, the only thing worse than being broke, and you smokers will know this, is being broke with no cigarettes. And, and those are little things that did change my life. And slowly things improved, and I learned more of the culture. And the more I practiced culture, I think, the better I did, the better I understood myself. the better I understood, the consequences of life, the consequences of my own actions. A lot of times, even it doesn't matter where it's at, something's going bad, I really won't argue with the person. They feel the way they feel, and I need to go back and think about, what was my place in that. And, a lot of people say, well, it's good to fight for certain things. Yeah, it is. But other times, it's just, it says something about your character if you're just quiet. You don't need to know what I think about you. So, it's things like that. Now I have like a really good job that I really enjoy. On my journey, I was able to get my driver's license back. Vehicle, I have insurance. I have renter's insurance. And, I'm content. I'm not rich. I don't have like a ton of money, but I have enough money. And, something else that changed real huge. I don't know if any of you can remember this or if you still do it, is on payday, it used to be a race to see how fast I could get rid of my money. And it's not like that anymore. Paydays come and go. I'm never broke. Something else I also learned too is don't borrow money. Don't borrow it from people. Don't borrow it to people. Because people will disappoint you when it comes time to pay you back. And if you're counting on the money that you borrowed them to be paid back on a certain date, it usually doesn't happen. So, if you are going to borrow money, don't borrow any more than you are willing to lose. So, those are some words of wisdom right there. But all in all, I'm pleased with the last 18 years of my life. When I first got here, I don't even know how I was feeling. I was not feeling good about life in general. And being, I guess I've been homeless before in my life, but I wasn't like in the street homeless. So when I hit in the street homeless, that was a wake up call. And you can either be that way the rest of your life, or you can figure out how to fix it. Now, if you're someplace like Duluth, there's a lot of cool programs to help you out. If you're a veteran, there's even more cool programs to help you out. So, and you're getting on your feet here in Duluth, there's lots of places give away free food. The Chum, the Damiano, Union Gospel Mission, Salvation Army. So I know tough times are kind of upon us right now with the economy, but, those are some resources you can check into. I always do try to pay a little back here and there. And a big part about when you're paying back to your community is be humble about it. Nobody needs to know exactly what I'm doing to pay my community back, because I don't want it's not about the recognition. So, but I guess kind of getting up there on the minutes on this one. So we'll cut it off there. Until next time. Gigawabman.